His blind date seat stayed empty. Then a small girl appeared and changed everything. The weight and the wonder empty chairs hide beautiful beginnings. The crystal chandeliers of the sapphire room cast dancing shadows across the white tablecloths as Nathan Cross adjusted his cufflinks for the third time. His reflection in the polished silverware showed a man who looked perfectly composed on the outside, but inside his chest, a familiar tension coiled tighter with each passing minute. 23 minutes late. He glanced at his phone screen, the bright numbers mocking him with their precision. Nathan had built his career on timing. Every meeting scheduled to the minute, every deal closed with clockwork efficiency. His tech company had revolutionized how people managed their lives, yet here he sat, unable to manage his own evening. His business partner had insisted on this blind date, claiming Nathan needed to reconnect with humanity after spending too many nights alone in his penthouse office. The restaurant hummed with the soft chatter of couples and the gentle clink of wine glasses. Nathan watched them all, wondering if any of these people had shown up on time for their first dates. He was about to signal for the check when he heard the patter of small feet against marble floor. A tiny blonde hurricane in a yellow sundress materialized beside his table. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with curls that bounced as she moved and eyes the color of summer sky. Before Nathan could react, she grabbed the edge of his jacket with sticky fingers. "My mommy says she's very, very sorry she's late," Ruby announced with the seriousness of someone delivering state secrets. Her words tumbled out in a rush, as if she'd been practicing them the entire way there. Nathan stared at the child, his prepared speech about punctuality dissolving on his tongue, something about her earnest expression, the way she looked up at him without fear or hesitation, reminded him of a version of himself he'd long forgotten. A boy who once believed the best in people before disappointment taught him otherwise. She helped a grandma lady who dropped all her things, Ruby continued, still gripping his jacket. There were oranges everywhere. I counted 12 of them rolling down the sidewalk. Before Nathan could form a response, a breathless voice called out, "Ruby! Sweetheart, I told you to wait by the door." Violet Hayes appeared like a whirlwind of apology and chaos. Her auburn hair had escaped from what might have once been a neat bun, and her floral dress bore a small juice stain near the hem. She carried an oversized canvas bag on one shoulder and held a pair of Ruby's shoes in her other hand. But what struck Nathan most were her eyes, the same bright blue as her daughter's, filled with genuine warmth despite her obvious embarrassment. "I am so incredibly sorry," Violet said, gently pulling Ruby back while extending her free hand to Nathan. "I'm Violet Hayes, and this is my daughter Ruby, who apparently doesn't understand the concept of waiting." Nathan stood automatically, his business training kicking in even as his mind reeled. Nathan Cross. He shook her hand, noting the paint stains on her fingers, the silver rings that looked handmade, the complete absence of pretense. "I did it, Mommy," Ruby announced proudly. "I told him you were sorry, just like you said." Violet laughed, a sound that seemed to lighten the entire room. "You certainly did, little bird." She looked back at Nathan, her expression shifting to something more vulnerable. There really was an elderly woman who dropped her groceries. I couldn't just walk past, and then the oranges kept rolling, and Ruby thought we should return each one personally, and I realize this sounds like the most elaborate excuse in the world, but I promise it's true. Something in her voice, in the way she held her daughter protectively while meeting his gaze with honest eyes, made Nathan believe every word. "It's fine," he heard himself say, surprising even himself. The maitre d' appeared with a booster seat, and soon Ruby was settled between them, swinging her legs and eyeing the breadbasket with clear intent. Violet tried to smooth down her hair, gave up, and offered Nathan a sheepish smile. "I teach art at the community center," she said, as if this explained everything. "I'm used to chaos, but usually it's the good kind. Paint explosions and glitter. Emergencies, not grocery store disasters." Nathan found himself leaning forward, genuinely curious. "What kind of art do you teach?" "Everything. Watercolors for the seniors on Monday mornings, after-school classes for kids Ruby's age, and abstract painting for adults who need to remember how to play." Her face lit up as she spoke, hands moving to illustrate her words. Art isn't about perfection. It's about expression, about finding beauty in the unexpected. Ruby grabbed a piece of bread and began dissecting it with the focus of a surgeon. Mommy lets me paint on big papers. Sometimes I use my feet. Foot painting is very advanced, Nathan said seriously, earning a delighted giggle from Ruby and a surprised smile from Violet. The waiter arrived, and Violet ordered simply, choosing the pasta and a grilled cheese for Ruby without even glancing at the prices. Nathan noticed but said nothing, instead ordering the salmon and suggesting they share an appetizer. As the waiter left, Violet pulled out crayons from her impossibly large bag, spreading them across the white tablecloth for Ruby. I hope that's okay, she said. She gets restless, and crayons are better than having her redecorate the restaurant. It's perfect, Nathan said, watching as Ruby immediately began drawing circles and stars. Their conversation flowed easier than Nathan expected. Violet told him about her students, about the elderly man who discovered watercolors at 83 and now painted every sunrise, about the teenager who communicated through abstract art better than words. She spoke about single motherhood, with the same matter-of-fact grace she brought to everything else. Ruby's father isn't in the picture, she said quietly, glancing at her daughter to make sure she was absorbed in her drawing. It's been just us for 3 years now. Some days are harder than others, but we're happy. We have our art studio apartment, our Saturday morning pancake tradition, and each other. Nathan found himself sharing things he rarely told anyone. About building his company from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success, about how he'd optimized every aspect of his life except the parts that actually mattered. You can't schedule happiness, Violet said softly. Trust me, I've tried. But Ruby taught me that the best moments are usually the unplanned ones. As if on cue, Ruby reached for her water glass with too much enthusiasm. The glass tipped, water cascading across the table toward Violet's lap. She gasped, pushing her chair back, but Nathan was already moving. From his inner jacket pocket, he produced a neatly folded handkerchief, the kind his grandfather had taught him to always carry. Without thinking, Nathan knelt beside Violet's chair, dabbing at the water on her dress with careful, gentle movements. His hand paused just above her knee, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the gesture. He looked up, meeting her eyes, and time seemed to slow. Violet's breath caught. In his face she saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine care, vulnerability, beneath the polished exterior. Thank you, she whispered. I'm sorry, Ruby said in a small voice, her eyes welling with tears. Nathan turned to her, his expression softening completely. Hey, accidents happen. And now we all know that water makes the tablecloth patterns more interesting, right? Ruby's tears transformed into a wobbly smile. Really? Really? In fact, I think you've improved it. For the rest of the meal, the awkwardness melted away. Ruby drew a picture of the three of them at the table, giving Nathan extraordinarily tall hair and violet flowers for hands. Nathan found himself laughing, really laughing, in a way he hadn't in years. Violet shared stories about her art classes, her eyes bright with passion and purpose. When dessert arrived, a chocolate creation that Ruby approached with reverent awe, Nathan realized something fundamental had shifted inside him. This wasn't the evening he'd planned. It was better. Messy, unpredictable, and somehow more real than anything he'd experienced in years. As they prepared to leave, Nathan offered to drive them home. Violet hesitated, glancing at Ruby, who was fighting sleep, in her arms. We usually take the bus, Violet said. Ruby likes to watch the city lights through the window. At least let me walk you to the bus stop, Nathan said. It wasn't a request, and Violet seemed to sense that he needed this as much as she needed to maintain her independence. They walked together through the cooling evening air, Ruby drowsy on Violet's hip. At the bus stop, under the glow of streetlights and city stars, Nathan made a decision that would change everything. Can I see you again? He asked. Both of you? Violet studied him for a long moment. She'd been disappointed before, had learned to protect her heart and Ruby's. But something in Nathan's eyes, something honest and a little bit scared, made her nod. Yes, she said simply. But fair warning, we come as a package deal. Ruby and I are a team. I wouldn't want it any other way, Nathan replied. As the bus pulled up, Ruby lifted her head from Violet's shoulder and waved. Bye-bye, Nathan. You're nice. Nathan waved back, watching the bus disappear into the city night. He stood there longer than necessary, a smile playing at his lips, his handkerchief still damp in his pocket. For the first time in years, Nathan Cross had absolutely no plan, no schedule, no carefully mapped strategy, and he'd never felt more alive. The beautiful unfolding. The weeks that followed felt like watercolors bleeding into each other, beautiful and unexpected. Nathan found himself drawn into Violet and Ruby's world, a place where schedules were suggestions and spontaneity was celebrated. Their second meeting happened not in a fancy restaurant, but in Violet's art studio, a converted warehouse space she shared with 3 other artists. Welcome to Controlled Chaos, Violet said, opening the door to reveal a room exploding with color. Canvases lined every wall, some finished, others barely started. Paint tubes and brushes occupied every surface. And in the corner, Ruby had her own small easel with paintings taped to the wall above it. Nathan walked in slowly, taking it all in. The space smelled like turpentine and coffee, like creativity, made tangible. On Violet's main easel stood a painting of a city street at dawn, the buildings rendered in soft blues and purples, with a small girl's silhouette holding her mother's hand in the foreground. Is this Ruby? He asked, stepping closer. Violet nodded, coming to stand beside him. I paint what I love. Lately, that's been morning walks with her, the way the world looks fresh before it fully wakes up. It's beautiful, Nathan said, and meant it. He'd collected expensive art for his office, pieces recommended by interior designers. But this painting moved something in him that 100 gallery showings never had. Ruby tugged at his hand. Come see mine. She dragged him to her corner, where paintings in primary colors covered every available space. Stick figures with triangle dresses, houses with smoking chimneys, a family of what might have been cats, or possibly aliens. This one is you, Ruby announced, pointing to a painting of 3 figures under a yellow sun. That's you, that's Mommy, and that's me. Nathan's throat tightened unexpectedly. In Ruby's painting, the 3 figures held hands in a line, all with enormous smiles. He'd been in their lives for such a short time, yet somehow he'd already made it into her art, into her understanding of family. It's perfect, he managed to say. Over the following weeks, Nathan learned to live differently. Saturday mornings weren't for golf with investors, but for pancakes at Violet's apartment, where Ruby insisted on adding chocolate chips to every single one. Sunday afternoons meant trips to the park, where Ruby would chase pigeons while Nathan and Violet sat on a bench talking about everything and nothing. He met Violet's art students. The elderly gentleman named Frank, who painted portraits of his late wife, each one a love letter in watercolor. The teenage girl, Quinn, who worked through her anxiety with abstract explosions of color. The middle-aged businessman who took Violet's classes to remember there was more to life than quarterly reports. You're changing lives, Nathan told Violet one evening as they cleaned up after class. She laughed softly. I'm teaching people to paint. No, he said, catching her hand. You're teaching them to see beauty again, to take time for things that matter. You taught me that. Violet's eyes softened. You're not as polished as you pretend to be, Nathan. Cross. I'm starting to realize polish isn't everything. Their relationship deepened through small gestures. Nathan brought Ruby books, not expensive collector's editions, but well-loved stories from used bookstores. Violet left small paintings for him, postcards, really, capturing moments they'd shared. A coffee cup at sunrise. Ruby's shoes kicked off, under a park bench. His hands, paint-stained from helping in the studio. One evening, as Nathan read Ruby a bedtime story in their small apartment, his phone buzzed incessantly. Work emergencies, board meetings, urgent decisions needed. He glanced at the screen, then silenced it completely. Not important? Violet asked from the doorway, having watched the exchange. Nothing is more important than finishing this story, he said, looking down at Ruby, who was fighting sleep. The dragon hasn't been defeated yet, and I promise her he would be. Violet's heart did something complicated in her chest. She'd grown up with absent fathers, with men who promised the world and delivered excuses. But here was Nathan Cross, tech millionaire, choosing dragons over deals. Ruby fell asleep before the dragon's defeat, her small hand still clutching Nathan's sleeve. He carefully extracted himself, following Violet to the kitchen where she was, making tea. "You're good with her," Violet said quietly. "She makes it easy." Nathan accepted the mug she offered. "I never thought about being a father before. Never seemed to have space for it in my life. But now—" "Now?" Violet prompted. "Now I can't imagine my life without you both in it." They stood in the tiny kitchen, the space between them charged with something bigger than words. Violet set down her mug and stepped closer. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Ruby's already attached to you. If this doesn't work, if you decide our chaos doesn't fit into your world, it won't just be my heart that breaks." Nathan set his own mug down and took her hands. "I'm scared too. I'm terrified of messing this up, of not being enough. But Violet, I've never been more certain of anything than I am of this. Of us." He kissed her then, soft and gentle. A promise sealed in the quiet of her kitchen while Ruby slept in the next room. It was perfect not because it was passionate or dramatic, but because it felt like coming home. The fairy tale shattered on a Thursday morning. Violet was setting up for her senior watercolor class when her phone erupted with notifications, text messages, social media alerts, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. With shaking hands, she opened the first link. Tech billionaires, secret romance, Nathan Cross dating struggling single mother. The article was accompanied by photos, grainy but unmistakable. Nathan carrying Ruby on his shoulders in the park, Violet laughing as they shared ice cream, the three of them walking hand in hand down the street. Every private moment captured and dissected for public consumption. The comments were worse. Some praised Nathan's generosity in dating someone beneath his station. Others accused Violet of being a gold digger, of using Ruby to trap a wealthy man. Speculation ran wild about how much Nathan was paying her, whether the relationship was real or charity work. Violet felt sick. This wasn't their story. This wasn't the quiet joy of Saturday pancakes or the gentle way Nathan tucked Ruby in at night. This was their private life, exposed and twisted into entertainment. Frank arrived for class, took one look at Violet's face, and gently took her phone. "Don't read anymore," he said kindly. "Those people don't know you or him." But the damage was done. By afternoon, reporters had found the art studio. By evening, someone had leaked Violet's address. When Nathan arrived that night, he found Violet pacing her apartment while Ruby played with blocks, oblivious to the chaos. "I'm so sorry," Nathan said immediately. "I should have prepared you for this. Should have protected you better." "Protected me?" Violet's voice cracked. "Nathan, they're calling me a charity case, saying Ruby is your philanthropic project. How do I explain that to her when she's old enough to read those articles?" "We ignore them," Nathan said firmly. "We know the truth." "Do we?" Violet challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks exactly like what they're saying. Rich man, poor woman, cute kid in the middle. It's a story people want to believe. It's not our story," Nathan insisted. "Isn't it?" Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks. "I'm an art teacher, barely making rent. You're a tech billionaire. This was always going to end like this." Ruby looked up from her blocks, sensing the tension. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Violet wiped her eyes quickly. "I'm okay, little bird." Nathan knelt down to Ruby's level. "I have to go away for a while," he said softly. "But I'll come back, I promise." "Promise, promise?" Ruby asked, her lip trembling. Nathan looked at Violet, who had turned away. "Promise, promise," he said, though the words felt hollow. 3 days of silence followed. Violet ignored Nathan's calls, deleted his texts unread. She threw herself into teaching, into caring for Ruby, into pretending her heart wasn't breaking with each passing hour. Ruby stopped asking where Nathan was after the second day, but the pictures she drew became darker. The smiling family figures replaced by solitary shapes. On the third evening, just as dusk painted the sky purple, someone knocked. Violet opened the door to find Nathan standing there, transformed. He wore faded jeans and an old sweatshirt, his usually perfect hair messy. In his arms he carried 2 plastic grocery bags. "Ramen noodles," he said, lifting one bag. "The good kind. And microwave, popcorn and candy that probably isn't actually chocolate." Violet stared at him. "I'm not here as Nathan Cross, CEO," he continued, his voice raw. "I'm here as the man who reads dragon stories, the man who can't flip pancakes to save his life, the man who loves you and Ruby more than anything he's ever built." Ruby appeared at Violet's elbow. "Nathan!" She launched herself at him, and he dropped the bags to catch her. "I brought movie snacks," he told her seriously, "and I thought maybe we could watch cartoons." Ruby pulled back, looking at him with wise eyes. "Are you going to leave again?" "Not if your mom will let me stay." Violet's vision blurred with tears. "I was trying to protect her, protect us." "I know," Nathan said, setting Ruby down and stepping closer to Violet. "But we're stronger together than apart. Let them write their stories. We'll live our truth." "What if it's too hard?" Violet whispered. "Then it's hard. We'll figure it out." Together, he pulled something from his pocket, Ruby's chalk drawing from weeks ago, now laminated and preserved, the 3 stick figures holding hands. "She drew this for me, her family. That's all that matters, Violet. Not headlines or opinions, just this." Violet broke then, letting him wrap his arms around her as sobs shook her shoulders. Ruby hugged both their legs, creating a tangle of family in the doorway. That weekend, Nathan took them to the park one more time. Ruby brought her sidewalk chalk, the special kind that washed away in the rain. She knelt on the concrete path and drew with careful concentration, 3 figures under a bright sun. Above them, in wobbly letters, she wrote, "My family." Nathan looked at it, then at Violet. Without a word, he knelt down on the pavement beside Ruby's drawing. Violet's breath caught as he met her eyes. "Can I stay?" he asked simply. "For every moment, planned and unplanned? For sick days and art shows and pancake Saturdays? Can I be part of this family you've built?" Ruby clapped her chalky hands. "Say yes, Mommy." Violet knelt too, taking Nathan's face in her paint-stained hands. "You already are," she whispered. "You've been family since the moment Ruby grabbed your jacket." He kissed her there, in the morning, sunlight, with Ruby cheering and chalk dust on his jeans. When they finally stood, Ruby took both their hands. "Can we get ice cream now?" she asked practically. They walked together down the tree-lined path, 3 shadows merging into one. Behind them, Ruby's chalk family smiled up at the sky. Temporary, but perfect. Just like every beautiful moment worth living. Later, someone would snap a photo of them at the ice cream shop, laughing as Ruby got chocolate on everyone's clothes. The photo would go viral, but this time the comments were different. Stories of hope, of love transcending boundaries, of families formed by choice, rather than circumstance. But Nathan, Violet, and Ruby wouldn't see those comments for hours. They were too busy being a family which required no audience, no validation, no approval beyond the 3 hearts beating in sync. Because sometimes the greatest love stories don't end with grand gestures or perfect proposals. Sometimes they end with sticky hands and melted ice cream, with laughter and sidewalk chalk, with the simple, profound choice to stay. And staying, they both learned, was the bravest thing of all.